here on the West Coast. I'm in Los Angeles, California. This is the Anthony Davis Show. I'm Anthony Davis. We've got lots to talk about this morning, and hopefully you're going to join us for, many of the conversations that we have featuring the news and what's happening across the United States of America. That's kind of how we cover it here on the morning, or in the morning here in LA. And depending on where you are, you can join in as well, and we'll review papers, hopefully from where you live. We've got some big subjects to talk about today, including the video that's emerged of a white police officer fatally shooting a black man. His name's Patrick Loyoya. I'll explain what we know so far about that. Using people as props, why Greg Abbott's DC migrant bus is a dehumanizing political stunt. This is as Greg Abbott is basically busing people who are migrants who want to go to DC. It's voluntary, but he's positioned it and made it look like it's not. Once again, Elon Musk is making headlines regarding Twitter, this time because he's offered to buy it. We'll look at how Musk's getting everything he wants out of Twitter and ask why this is making his employees nervous. And on this day in 1924, Louis Sullivan, American architect and father of skyscrapers, died at 67. We'll look at his lasting legacy. So if you want to jump in, you can wake up your Echo shows, say the word say, and then your message, and talk to us that way. You're also welcome to chat with Backchannel.tv. It's a web chat facility. That's Backchannel.tv. Go in there and have your conversation with us. And then finally, YouTube has a streaming service there. Stacey's in. Good morning. Welcome. Yes, I am ready. Hopefully you are too. We're going to start our paper review this morning with the Abilene Reporter News. White House criticizes Abbott truck inspections policy is how that starts, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? It's, yet again, Greg Abbott bringing in his totalitarian policies. It says Greg Abbott's order that all commercial trucks entering Texas from Mexico be stopped and inspected is causing significant disruptions to the food and automobile supply chains nationwide, according to the White House Secretary Jen Psaki. The continuous flow of legitimate trade and travel and CBP's ability to do its job should not be obstructed, Psaki said, referring to U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Governor Abbott's actions are impacting people's jobs and the livelihoods of hardworking American families. The statement from the Democratic Biden administration comes as Texas' two-term Republican governor has come under fire from the trucking and manufacturing industries for ordering the inspections that reportedly take up to an hour for each truck. So, that is going to be insane and kind of crazy. Excuse me, just having a little sip of morning tea. It's good to be the Queen. This is the Dairy Queen. She's 75, and if you think she is old, considering that Queen Elizabeth is 95, the Queen is but a babe, it says. Yes, her loyal subjects celebrate DQ's 75th birthday. We all have Dairy Queen stories because, well, who hasn't enjoyed those treats and eats? I've never experienced the Dairy Queen, but I appreciate that it is an American institution. Of course I appreciate that. It says through April 24th, you can get a small ice cream cone for 75 cents. I mean, why not make it $1? I mean, who wants the change? Press release said, remember the good old days when you can get a delicious DQ chocolate dipped cone filled with creamy vanilla soft serve for less than $1? Well, yeah, barely. Here's the pricing today. A small cone, $1.99. Medium cone, $2.39. Large cone, $2.69. That's almost expensive as gas or milk. So for a few days this month, you can basically get 3 cones for the price of 1. That's what they're saying. That's great. Here in Los Angeles, an ice cream in a cone is about $7. Not $2. And I'll be honest, gas should never have been $2 a gallon. Gas should always have been $5 a gallon. But for some reason, it was very cheap here in the Americas. Most zoo birds off exhibit as precaution for avian flu. This is at the Abilene Zoo. They're all on vacation. The birds recently were taken off exhibit as a precaution against highly pathogenic avian influenza. They won't be seen during the Easter period, typically busy at the zoo. It's a shame. So that's the Abilene Reporter News this morning here on Backchannel. Let's jump next into the Beaumont Enterprise as we're getting through these morning papers. Michael's dropped in welcome. And Radika's dropped in as well. Says, is there a way to turn something that can describe what's happening on the screen? Because I have little vision. I'm visually impaired. I don't think there is a kind of audio description, Radika, but there's just the sound. There's just the sound. I don't think there is. I don't think there's audio description as far as I know. I don't even know if there's live subtitling. Michael's joined us. Stacey says, I went to Dairy Queen when I was growing up for yummy ice cream shakes. And Sophie has joined us as well. Welcome, Sophie. Nice to see you. Beaumont Enterprise this morning. Man attempts to flee custody. This is a Beaumont man who was hospitalized on Wednesday morning after he jumped off a balcony in the Jefferson County Courthouse in an attempt to escape custody. Yes, prior to the leap. I mean, he literally did jump off a balcony. Prior to the leap, Brandon J. Miller's bond was revoked due to a positive drug test, and criminal court judge John Stevens Jr. doubled the bond for his charges to $75,000. 31-year-old Miller was out on bond for drug charges and allegedly previously evading arrest. Stevens said Miller had a rich criminal history, that he had no room for error. He was seen arguing with and interrupting the judge, who told the man, you could not even follow the rules of the court. And that he had no credibility because of the number of times he'd been convicted of felonies. Wow. Christus Hospital's surgical staff showcase robot tools. This is interesting. I do love robotic surgery, don't you? Don't you think it's the most amazing thing you've ever seen? Yes, in the spirit of the Easter holidays, Christus St. Elizabeth surgical staff on Wednesday morning used a robot to dye Easter eggs and later suture a cut in a banana. The Da Vinci surgical system, which is used for any abdominal surgeries, including gynecological, prostate, bariatric, hernia, and any general surgery, has been a game changer for doctors and patients. It was the first robotic system St. Elizabeth procured, performing their first robotic surgery in July 2013. Well, it's now one of 3 robotic systems the hospital has added to its surgical tool belt. There we go. And subway suspect tipped off police before shooting. That's right, the man accused of shooting 10 people on a Brooklyn subway train was arrested on Wednesday and charged with a federal terrorism offense after the suspect himself called the police to come and get him. 62-year-old Frank R. James was taken into custody about 30 hours after the carnage on a rush-hour train, which left 5 victims in critical condition and people around the city on edge. It was a bit weird that the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, he said, "My fellow New Yorkers, we got him." Right? No trial. The guy hadn't even been charged yet, and he's like, "We got him." No, double checking to make sure it's the right guy. It's very interesting the way this kind of happens. This whole kind of innocent until proven guilty. No, guilty, assumed until proven guilty. And that was from the mayor. It's a bit much, isn't it? James was awaiting arraignment on a charge that pertains to terrorist or other violent attacks against mass transit systems and carries a sentence of up to life in prison, according to Brooklyn U.S. Attorney Breon Peace. In recent months, James railed in online videos about racism and violence in the U.S. and about his experiences with mental health care in New York City. He had criticized Adams' policies on mental health and subway safety, but the motive for the subway attack remains unclear. And there is no indication that James had ties to terror organizations, international or otherwise. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, and if you look at his kind of tropes, if you look at the way this guy kind of talks, some of the stuff he says is just stuff that's repeated from Fox News. And that's my concern, is that, people like this guy are being wound up by what these networks have to say. It's crazy, isn't it, that the level of responsibility of being a broadcaster, and they don't care for the consequences of all of this anger and negativity. Of course, Fox News arguably is responsible for people not believing in the vaccine, right? Because of their anti-vaccine attitude, and even their anti-COVID attitude, and their anti-masking attitude, And then you could argue that they also have a kind of general anti-democrat attitude, which just winds people up. And in this case, here we have a guy, Frank James, who has obviously been ingesting all of this crazy talk and then wants to go and do something about it. Anyway, that's the Beaumont Enterprise. The Houston Chronicle is next. They lead with Abbott brakes on border inspections. Truck checks are eased at busiest port near Laredo after backlash against governor's directive. You see, one paper says he's announced it, another paper says he's pulled it. Governor Greg Abbott relented on Wednesday, agreeing to ease the additional safety inspections of trucks at the busiest border entry point near Laredo in exchange for promises of more border security by Mexican officials along the 8-mile stretch of the border. The move comes after Abbott endured days of withering criticism from both Democrats and Republicans and faced pushback from shipping companies and the Texas Trucking Association. Since he implemented the more thorough inspections a week ago, truck traffic at many of the Texas ports of entry has stalled. In Laredo, the nation's biggest trucking port, the normal 30 minutes or less to get across ballooned to 3 hours or longer, delaying shipments of everything from produce to electronics and driving up costs for trucking companies. But Abbott said on Wednesday that the easing of inspections is only happening along the 8-mile stretch of border with Nuevo Leon, which has a tiny portion of the 1,254-mile border with Texas. Abbott said he's talking to leaders of other Mexican states to work out similar agreements in return for speeding up the inspection process. Yeah, well, I don't know. He's not doing it because it needs to be done. He's doing it because he wants to be seen to be tough, Because there's, elections coming up and he wants to be seen as tough. Because he thinks that's what his people want. Paid parental leave has been okayed. Yes, this is very good. City employees will have access to paid parental leave for the first time, beginning in May after a decade-long push to adopt the family-friendly policy that advocates hope will help the city attract and retain working parents. The City Council on Wednesday unanimously approved the new leave policy, which will give workers who have been with the city for at least 6 months up to 12 weeks of paid leave for the birth, adoption, of foster placement of a child. The policy also includes paid time off during pregnancy for certain health matters. I love the fact that this is it's such a whole new thing here, conceptually, and yet the rest of the world has been doing paid leave in some countries up to 48 weeks, fully paid, But in Texas, and this is only city workers, it's only city employees, So it's interesting. Okay, let's see what's next here on the old list. Carl's popped in. Thank you. And Radhika says, my uncle listens to your news every single time in the morning. That's great. Thank you, Radhika. Jade's joined us. Prentice, Magnificent Horse. Michael here for the first time from North Carolina. Welcome. Beautiful. Great to know that you are, here and enjoying the show, even though we're only 17 minutes in. Okay, let's see what else we have here. County officials passed bail measure requiring fee of 10% up front. This is a vote by the Harris County Bail Bond Board on Wednesday, regulated aspects of the local bail bond industry by requiring licensed agents to take an upfront fee of at least 10% from defendants charged with violent crimes to ensure they're released from jail. Yes, enforcement of the new rule will rely on a bail bondsman's sworn word in affidavits, and litigation to nix the policy is likely to follow. The vote followed a failed attempt in March to pass the 10% minimum, despite the Commissioner's court unanimous support for the measure as an attempt to tackle the drastic rise of violent crime during the pandemic. I mean, this is very interesting to me. This is a whole thing, this concept of, posting bail and, just the cost of bail, that is, people are prevented from making bail because it's just too expensive. And this is a huge thing here in California as well. Okay, that's the Houston Chronicle for you. We're dedicating a fair amount to Texas this morning because of Greg Abbott using people as props, as it were. The Longview Journal now, Longview News Journal. 10% of mail-in ballots rejected. Elections admin says office taking steps to make more voters aware of new rules. Yeah, well, this is interesting as well, isn't it? This is Gregg County mail-in ballots from the March primary were rejected because of missing information related to a new state law, according to a final tally from the Elections Office. Senate Bill 1, approved this past year by the legislature, requires voters to put an identification number on their mail-in application and on the mail-in ballot itself. The identifying number can either be a driver's license, state ID, or social security number. If the number provided on the application does not match what is in the Elections Office voter registration system, the application is rejected. The March primary was the first election in which provisions of the new law were implemented. According to information from the Elections Administrator, Jennifer Briggs, out of 320 Republican mail-in ballots, 19 or 5.9% were rejected because of missing ID information. 2 ballots that were declined because of missing information were also returned to voters for correction but were not received back by the deadline. And on the Democratic side, out of 488, 62 or 12.7% were not accepted. And that's good for them, isn't it? Because that's the whole point of this scam. The scam is to prevent Democrats from successfully casting a vote in elections so that Republicans win every time. It's a scam. And it's happening not just in Texas, this is Gregg County, but it's happening all over the country. By making it more difficult to vote, it is potentially creating a space whereby you will be less represented, because not everybody is registered. There's a lot of immigrants here who are entitled to vote, but they might not be signed up with the correct IDs. They might not want to give their IDs, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have the right to vote. Abbott defies border pressure. Greg Abbott on Wednesday defied mounting pressure to immediately end truck inspections that have gridlocked the US-Mexico border for days, saying despite miles-long backups and spoiled produce, he would not rescind his new order at all until he gets more assurances of security. I mean, this guy, seriously. Historic Longview Farmers Market returns on Saturday. This is lovely, isn't it? In some places, in Florida, for example, you might be interested to know this, Carla, that a farmers market in Florida is basically just somewhere that they sell Aldi vegetables outdoors, where people have gone to Aldi, bought a load of vegetables, and then resell them at a higher price outdoors. It's true. There is, the concept of what a farmer's market is different in different places, because of course we have food deserts, and Florida is also a food desert. You cannot get good food and produce in Florida. And it seems crazy, doesn't it? But all the food that's made there is exported. People don't want good food there. And so a lot of these, places that claim to be farmers markets are anything but. It's just an excuse to sell food outdoors at a higher price and not necessarily good quality food. I mean, it depends where you are. In different places you get different versions of this, but in food deserts this is often the case. But this here, I'm looking at this picture in Longview Farmers Market, and the produce looks lovely. Some nice photographs. Presidents of countries on Russia's doorstep visit Ukraine. This is the presidents of 4 countries visited Ukraine on Wednesday and underscored their support for the embattled country, where they saw heavily damaged buildings and demanded accountability for what they called war crimes carried out by Russian forces. The visit by the presidents of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia was a strong show of solidarity from the countries on NATO's eastern flank. 3 of them, like Ukraine, once part of the Soviet Union. The leaders traveled by train to the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, to meet with their counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, and visited some of the areas and nearby towns that have been devastated by the Russian military. So there we go. That's all on the front of the Longview News Journal this morning. Carl's dropped in and joined us. Groovy Panther is here. Stacey says I don't have to worry much about food because I get it when my mum and dad buy it for me. That's good. And who else has joined? Oh, Prentice, Magnificent Horse, Michael, still with us. Thank you. Nice to see you. Okay, let's go back to the newspapers with the San Antonio Express News, especially for Stacey. Report finds war crimes in Ukraine. Yes, Russian forces in Ukraine have committed violations of international humanitarian law, some of which could constitute war crimes, says an investigation by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. The organization said in a report released on Wednesday that it found clear patterns of violation of international law by the Russian military. It concluded Ukrainian forces had been guilty of some abuses as well, particularly in the treatment of prisoners of war. The violations committed by the Russian Federation, however, are by far larger in nation and scale, the report said. I mean, this was inevitable, wasn't it? Tragically, this was inevitable. The document is, it says, one of the first in-depth studies of alleged rights abuses during Russia's 2-month offensive against Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia sharply rejected Joe Biden's description on Tuesday of its wartime acts as genocide. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the remark was hardly acceptable from a president of the United States, a country that has committed well-known crimes in recent times. Well, that is also true. Think about it. America obliterated Afghanistan and Iraq. Obliterated. People in Afghanistan still have nothing. America tried to fix it and just couldn't. They went in, George W. Bush, went in on false pretenses to Iraq, and then that spread to Afghanistan, and before you know it, they had devastated this entire region. And then they left. They retreated. And then they left it in the hands of the Taliban. So, he does have a point. And it's happened in other countries as well, going back years. Liberia. I mean, you only have to look at America's history of invading other countries to bring about a Western-style democracy, to realize that America is not, does not have its hands completely clean. England the same. I mean, England probably more than America. Britain basically colonized half the planet. And how did it do that? By murdering people. And somehow Britain now is this pillar of the community. But the reality is Britain probably committed more war crimes than anybody else. I mean, probably not more than Nazi Germany, admittedly. But even so. So we have to know our history in order to kind of understand where it goes. That's not excusing anything that has been done by Russia in Ukraine, because, of course, the difference being is that we have live video evidence. We have pictures. We have high-definition video of people being, of bodies in the street and shallow graves, people with their hands tied. And that in itself is very harrowing. But, of course, that stuff has happened in decades and generations before. We just didn't necessarily have the pictures. And that's the problem, isn't it? It's the documentation of these things that makes them more real. But I think it's important that we don't deny any of the atrocities that have been committed by Western countries as well. It doesn't take away from what Russia has done, but it does in some way set a precedent. I mean, I would like to think that the US and the UK haven't tortured anybody, but of course there's controversy over Guantanamo Bay and the waterboarding of people. So that is torture, and that was sanctioned by George W. Bush. And, it even continued under Obama briefly as well. And then there was this drive to kind of shut Guantanamo Bay. Do you remember? I think Obama was trying to shut it down. And then Trump decided that wasn't going to happen. But I think it's still open, still open for business. Okay, let's... Guantanamo Bay has 37 prisoners, inmates. Okay, well, I think there's space for 3 more, if you're interested. I don't know what their maximum capacity is, but yeah, don an orange jumpsuit. There's space left for Donald Trump and his daughter, his son-in-law, his 2 sons, Steve Bannon, Roger Stone. I mean, there's just enough room for all of those guys. Well, it's been open for 16 years, Guantanamo Bay. Yeah. What else do we have here? On the front of the San Antonio Express News, Abbott breaks on inspections. Greg Abbott relented on Wednesday, agreeing to ease the additional safety inspections of trucks at the busiest entry point near Laredo in exchange for promises of more border security by Mexican officials along one 8-mile stretch of the border. Also, border wall repairs threatened historic cemetery. There's so many border issues, isn't there? The U.S. Customs and Border Protection has already built concrete slabs topped with 18-foot steel bollards to the east and west of the cemetery. And property tax relief promised in city's budget. So there we go. That's the San Antonio Express News for you. Should we play the U.S. News Update so I can blow my nose? Because I'm pretty blocked up today. It sounds pretty pathetic, and I don't want to do it whilst during the show. So let's listen to the U.S. News Update. It's a daily podcast you can download wherever you get your podcasts, and here it is. It's Thursday, April 14. From the Volley Network, this is your daily U.S. News Update. I'm Anthony Davis. The Biden administration announced on Wednesday that it's extending the nationwide mask requirements for aeroplanes and public transit for 15 days as it monitors an uptick in COVID-19 cases. The CDC said it was extending the year, which was set to expire on April 18, until May 3rd to allow more time to study the BA2 Omicron subvariant that's now responsible for the vast majority of cases in the US. When the Transportation Security Administration, which enforces the rule for planes, buses, trains and transit hubs, extended the requirement last month, it said the CDC had been hoping to roll out a more flexible strategy that would have replaced the nationwide requirement. Meanwhile, the man suspected of setting off smoke bombs and spraying gunfire inside a New York City subway car, injuring 23 people, was arrested on Wednesday on a federal charge of violently attacking a mass transportation system, capping an around-the-clock manhunt. Frank Robert James was taken into custody in Lower Manhattan, about 8 miles from the scene of Tuesday's assault, after authorities determined his whereabouts with the help of tips from residents, but ultimately from James himself. James was arrested 30 hours after an attack that erupted during the morning commuter rush as the Manhattan-bound N-Line train was pulling into an underground station in Brooklyn's Sunset Park community, renewing fears of violence in the city's subway system. Your daily US News Update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. There it is, your US News Update. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. Grass Puddle has messaged on YouTube saying, Russia, UK did it. Okay. You might have to kind of give me some more to go on with that, I can't really guess between the lines, but I'm very happy to have a conversation about that. This is Backchannel, the Anthony Davis Show. For another hour and a half, we're discussing the news, looking through some of the stories making the headlines this morning. To Florida next, and the Bradenton Herald. If you would like to get in touch and have your say and be part of this, then you can. Radhika's joined us from Oregon. Michael is in from North Carolina. Zuo is here from Kansas. Parched Penguin has joined us. Thank you very much. Great to see you. Valuable Sloth is in the house as well. And Radika says, is there a way for me to change my name on the slideshow? That's a very good question. I think there is a way to do it. I think you have to kind of exit and go back in again. But we're going to check for you, and I'll let you know. The Bradenton Herald in Florida this morning leads with a photograph of 4 very old people. Sally, Rolf, Mike, and Rafferty. They are among the regulars who frequent the Mixon Fruit Farms selling land for a 7-Eleven store. It's a property that is bordered on the west by 27th Street East and on the east by south of the Manatee School District. It leaves Mixon Fruit Farms owners with 48 acres north, keeping Citrus Grove, Camtor's gift shop, bamboo operation, wedding venue, and more intact. Oh, I see. And that's why they like the ice cream at the Mixon Fruit Farms. They go in for an ice cream, you see, and there's a photograph of elderly people with their tongues out, which is not a great sign, you know? Quite ageist, aren't I? It sounds that way. The answer is I am quite ageist. I think there should be an upper limit, you know? I think 69, 70 should be like where it tops out. It's enough already. DeSantis confirms plan to eliminate Black District, it says. Governor Ron DeSantis confirmed on Tuesday that the congressional redistricting map he is proposing will dismantle a congressional district designed to help black voters living in the former plantation territories of North Florida. I think that's what they'll produce will be something that will be acceptable to folks, and obviously we get my signature for proposing it, he said at a bill signing press conference in Miami. It will, though, have North Florida drawn in a race-neutral manner. DeSantis has called legislators back to a special session on redistricting next week to redraw Florida congressional districts. And on Monday, House and Senate leaders announced that after successfully passing a legislative map that the court has approved, they will leave the map drawing work on the congressional plan to the governor. I mean, just think about this for a moment, right? He wanted to redraw the map to make sure Republicans won. It was rejected by the courts. It went back to him, and then he basically turned around and said, look, I'm going to do this whether you like it or not. And then the court said, okay. So he's obviously sweet-talked somebody, you know? They're basically rigging the election, and they're doing it in plain sight. This is the coup that failed the first time round that is going to be happening again. He cited Cooper versus Harris, a 2017 case in which the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 5-3 that the North Carolina General Assembly engaged in unconstitutional racial gerrymanders by relying on race too heavily when it drew 2 congressional districts following the 2010 census. DeSantis said the current Congressional District 5, which stretches across North Florida from Tallahassee to Jacksonville, linking urban and rural black voters in a region that was home to the slave plantations of the 1800s, divvies up people based on the color of their skin. And that is wrong, he said. That is not the way we've governed in the state of Florida. There has never been a district of that length and that shape that's been justifiable. DeSantis argued that if legislators retain CD5, which is held by U.S. Representative Al Lawson, a black Democrat, the map will be challenged as unconstitutional. And if legislators dismantle the district as he wants, the map will also face litigation. He says if you're going to have litigation either way, but I think the odds are higher that a map that is race neutral will be approved, and I think it's more likely that one that did that kind of intentional drawing would be ruled to violate the 14th Amendment. You see, this is like a double bluff racism, right? Because maps are purposely drawn to give representation to the underrepresented. And black people are underrepresented. Just look at Congress, right? Look at the number of people that are black or ethnic minority groups in Congress that are not old white men. You know, women are massively underrepresented, but black people and brown people are massively underrepresented in Congress. And then again, if you look at governors around the country, how many governors do you see that are representative of their state, you know? And so this is, you know, California should have a Mexican governor, really. Of course it should. We have a white Democrat. The point is that, you know, because of the disproportionate amount of white governance, there are maps that are designed to enable people to get representation. And what this will do, it will ultimately prevent the black people from getting democratic representation. And as we know, the Republican representation is not equal and fair when it comes to issues of race. Sarasota Bradenton Airport sets new passenger record. It said 442,000 travelers passed through the terminal in a month. 59% increase over the number of passengers served in March 2021. Passengers traveling through the airport year to year totaled 1,085,000 compared to about half of that the year before. You see, this is because of the pandemic easing and people kind of going back into their old habits of flying for no reason. Think about that, you know? We're supposed to have learned from this that we don't need to fly. It's not necessary. We can FaceTime. People love to travel. They just do, you know? So there we go. That's the Bradenton Herald this morning. If that's of use to you. Alan has joined us from Pennsylvania. Hello, Alan. Welcome to Backchannel. Nice to see you as we look through the morning papers here. We're doing Florida at the moment. Let's go to the news press next. Grass Puddles said Russia was blaming the UK on the atrocities in Bucha. Yes, that's right, they were. You know why they were doing that? They were doing it because... Let me see if I can get this right. I don't know if you heard this, Carla. This is a very interesting thing. Russia was blaming the UK for the atrocities in Bucha because Bucha sounds like the word butcher in English. Butcher. And this is what the Russians said. The reason why it must have been the British butchering these people is because butcher sounds like butcher in English, in British English. That was the Russian argument for why the British must have done it. Didn't get much coverage, that story, because people thought it was just silly. But I actually think it's very interesting. That is the level of thinking from the Russians. That's what they said. That's what they said. It must be the British because butcher sounds like butcher. Who'd have thought that you could even come up with something crazy like that? But that's what the Russians came up with. So, just so you know, because I think we were being asked a moment ago from Radhika how to change your name. He says, I figured it out. Yeah, you basically, you can say to your device, change my name to, and then it'll just do it on the dashboard. So you basically ask your device in the usual way. Another way is to acknowledge a user comment and ask for their name, which they can then say into their device, but that's slightly trickier. And you can also prompt, if your name there is no name, you can actually change that. If you don't want to have no name, you want to have your actual name, you can just say to your device, change my name to, and then give your real name or another name, you know, and then it should just change the name. So that's basically how you do it. You can just talk to your device. If you've got an Echo Show, just talk to it and tell it that you want to change your name, and it will change your name. It's pretty easy. Grass Puddle, I hope that helps you on the old, UK being blamed for the atrocities. The news press this morning, DeSantis fights culture wars. Jeb Bush was the education reform governor. Charlie Crist campaigned on the pocketbook issues. Rick Scott was all about jobs. And then there's Governor Ron DeSantis, chief of the woke police. Yes. DeSantis rose to fame fighting COVID-19 restrictions, but lately has become the face of the GOP's efforts to push back against liberal culture values, particularly around race and LGBTQ issues. It says the emphasis, is on conservative social issues, which is a big shift for the governor's race in the nation's biggest battleground state, but tracks with the GOP's evolution under former President Donald Trump, who emphasized culture war fights after years of Republican leaders worrying they would scare off suburban voters. DeSantis' ascent as a culture warrior has long been in the making, stretching back to his push against so-called undocumented immigrant sanctuary cities, and a bill last year that banned transgender athletes from competing in women's sports. He's just a really, really terrible person, basically. Cares nothing for the human race, cares nothing for minority groups, is clearly a white supremacist, refused to denounce the Nazi protest that took place in Florida. So he's clearly a Nazi sympathizer. This guy really is, the as bad as Trump. And so, and he's desperate for the presidency, clearly wants to win. And obviously Trump is older and is less capable. And I actually have a weird feeling that as much as these guys hate each other, I think Trump could end up endorsing DeSantis, And DeSantis could end up being the candidate. If Trump realizes in a couple of years' time that he's just too old and lazy. Because, it's a lot of work campaigning. It's not a lot of work for Trump to be the president. Once he became the president, he barely did anything. He just basically chilled and watched TV. And they used to publish his daily schedule. Do you remember this? And there was nothing on it. Whereas when you look back at Obama's daily schedule, there would be 5 or 6 official engagements in addition to the unofficial engagements of running the country. Trump had nothing. There was like lunch with the vice president. And then they invented this thing called executive time, and that happened every day between 8 a.m. and noon, or 9 a.m. and noon. And that was basically Trump not going into the Oval Office, staying in the apartment and watching TV. They called it executive time. And you could tell that he was watching TV. They worked it out. And do you know how they worked it out? He was tweeting stuff during that period of executive time every day that was word for word what had just been said on Fox News. So there was proof that he was watching television, because he was literally like watching it, getting riled up, and then he would tweet something that corresponded time-wise to what he'd just seen on TV. Whether it be on CNN or Fox or any of these networks that he was watching. He would watch CNN to get angry, and then he would watch Fox to placate himself. And then he would call into Fox and talk for hours, and they would have to try and get him off the phone. People forget what a crazy time that was, you had this negligent president who was so negligent and just an out-and-out liar about everything. I didn't know what was going on. Would never read the presidential daily briefing. I mean, Joe Biden takes the daily briefing, but so does Kamala Harris. So they take the daily briefing together, the security briefing, the defense briefing. Every day. Trump never read it. He actually said out loud, "I assume that if there's something serious in it, they'll tell me about it." That's what he said. If there's something important, they'll tell me. Initially, they had to start writing his name in the daily briefing. They had to reduce it down to a one-pager, and they said that they were starting to use his name in every sentence so he would keep reading, because he only liked reading about himself. The guy was so ill, so ill. No one ever talked about the mental illness. It's so crazy to me. We're supposed to be living in a society where mental illness is not a stigma anymore, and where we can talk openly about mental illness. And you had the most mentally ill person on the planet in the White House, and no one ever said anything about it. No one mentioned it. I mean, the main media didn't. There was one documentary that did a whole thing about it. It was called Unfit, The Psychology of Donald Trump. One of the best documentaries I ever saw. where it had a whole series of psychologists, psychotherapists, psychoanalysts, as well as, specialists. And they were all analyzing him through thousands of hours of video footage. And they basically all came to the same agreement about his illness. And yet, that show got very little mainstream media coverage. Nobody wanted to say it. It was like the elephant in the room, This notion that the president might be so mentally ill that he can't carry out his duties. And malignant narcissism is a personality disorder which is considered a mental health problem. And it's well documented now. And so there is a group of mental health professionals who have set up a Twitter handle called Duty to Warn. Are you aware of this, Carla? It's called Duty to Warn. And it's a group of mental health professionals, that some of whom appeared in this documentary, that it is their duty to warn us about the mental health of public servants through their own analysis. And it was set up in the wake of Donald Trump's presidency. Yeah. So if you go to @DutyToWarn on Twitter, you'll see this group and what it is that they do. And, they still, every day, remind us of what's going on with Trump's mental health. Judge says suit opponents must work together. Dozens of Lee and Collier County residential developments will have to wait a little longer to learn just how much money they lost in an alleged fraud scheme. And first, they'll have to work with lawyers for their former management company, which they've accused of stealing from them. The 35 associations have spent months asking a 20th Judicial Circuit Court to grant them access to Wells Fargo bank accounts that they say were hijacked by American Property Management Services. So there we go. There's a judge getting involved. And Polish Baltic presidents in Kiev and Russia say 1,000 Ukrainian troops surrendered in Mariupol. Really? Interesting. I think they mean Kiev, as Russia says. Russia is claiming that Ukrainian troops surrendered in Mariupol. I don't know about that. Just because Russia said it doesn't mean it's true. Thank you for your messages. Ryder says you're cleaning out, and you're cleaning out. My device is still working. I don't know if it's your end or my end. Oh, should that be cutting out? Maybe I'm cutting out. Well, I don't think I'm cutting out my end. So maybe it's your end. Stacey says our food supply would be much safer if Obama was running as president. Well, the food supply is becoming a serious issue, and that's mainly to do with climate change. And a lot of people don't realize the extent of how food is going to change. In fact, there's a very good article today that I was reading earlier that says the climate breakdown is already threatening many of our favorite foods. In Asia, rice fields are being flooded with salt water. Cyclones have wiped out vanilla crop in Madagascar. In Central America, highest temperatures ripen coffee too quickly. And drought in sub-Saharan Africa is withering chickpea crops. And rising ocean acidity is killing oysters and scallops in American waters. So, there it is. All our food systems, agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and aquaculture are buckling under the stress of rising temperatures, wildfires, droughts, and floods. This is the reality of our of our planet right now. And, there is a writer says, I think it's just the internet connection. It might be your internet connection, Ryder. I'm sorry I can't help you more. Stopping short of coming over and unplugging it and plugging it back in for you in Oregon, which I'm very happy to do. Yes, the Duty to Warn hashtag, which I just mentioned a moment ago, which is this group of mental health professionals that kind of analyze, the politics of the day. They're now saying that Elon Musk's desire to buy all of Twitter is an existential threat to humanity. You know? And this is actually something that Noam Chomsky said a couple of days ago. There's an article in the... Carlo, you're going to love this if you're into this type of thing. I'm hugely into it. There's an article in the New Statesman, Noam Chomsky, we're approaching the most dangerous point on human history. In human history. He's 95, and he talked about the climate catastrophe and the threat of nuclear war. And, this is something that's happening all over. All of these great brains in science and geopolitics, they're all coming to the same conclusion at the same time. That we're kind of hitting that breaking point, that crisis point. And, that's very worrying. I sat through the Noam Chomsky interview yesterday. It's an hour long. And listened to what he had to say. He's getting old now, so obviously he's... well, with regard to climate, he basically said what I just reported, that this, we are in denial about the fact that the food that we take for granted just will not be in the stores anymore. It just won't be available. And we have been wasting food at such a rate that we forget the value of it and that it has to come from somewhere. They say even in the best case scenario, global heating is expected to make the Earth less suitable for the crops that provide most of our calories. If no action is taken to curtail the climate crisis, crop losses will be devastating. Nature has a simple way to adapt to different climates, genetic diversity. Even if some plants react poorly to higher temperatures or less rainfall, other varieties can not only survive but thrive, giving humans more options on what they want to grow and eat. But the powerful food industry had other ideas over the past century. Humans have increasingly relied on fewer and fewer crop varieties that can be mass-produced and shipped around the world. The line between abundance and disaster is becoming thinner and thinner, and the public is unaware and unconcerned. This is the words of Dan Saladino, who's written a book called Eating to Extinction, which is very interesting, So... this is something we need to think about very seriously. And my concern is that Ron DeSantis, who doesn't believe in climate change, thinks it's a democratic issue. Donald Trump, who doesn't believe in climate change. These people, if Trump got re-elected, according to Noam Chomsky in his interview with the New Statesman, he claimed that if Trump got in again, that would be the end of the human race. He literally said it would be over, like game over. And he's not being dramatic. He's basically saying you can't put a climate change denier in the White House. You can't do that. And the problem is that, so many people just don't believe in climate change because right-wing media and the governors of Republican states have told them that it's just untrue and it's nothing to worry about, And Trump's argument is that the climate changing is cyclical, and he thinks that it just happens naturally, and it will it just, what goes around comes around, and it's not the case. We're in a period right now. We're in a specific period right now. Cora's joined us from Ohio. Welcome. Melted Crab has popped in as well. Full Baboon. Jolie. Welcome. Nice to see you. Riders thinks it was an internet connection. I was very pleased you got that sorted now. And can you interact with the other users? I think you can. I think you can chat with other users on your device, as well as with me, of course. Chris has popped in from home. Cora, hello. Stacy says, my father's concerned about how much food I'm getting. Well, he needs to be worried about how much food the planet's going to get. The problem is we're going to end up eating just, processed garbage. We won't be eating fresh food anymore. That's the tragedy of this. Okay, let's have a look at some more stuff here. Where did we get to? The Daily News for Kentucky is next. A new era electric vehicle battery plant to bring 2,000 jobs to Trans Park. Well, if that's a Republican plan, I thought they didn't like anything to do with trans anything. You know? Well, they're not into trans. I'm kidding, obviously. Yes, the future has come to Warren County along with an estimated 2,000 jobs. Japan-based Envision, which is among the world's largest producer of batteries for electric vehicles, announced on Wednesday at the state capitol. It plans to build a $2 billion, 3 million square foot plant on a 512-acre site that was recently added to the Kentucky Trans Park Industrial Park. So there we go. And a photograph of Governor Andy Beshear speaking on Wednesday at the Capitol in Frankfurt. So that's good news, isn't it? You know, I mean, it's also good to manufacture electric batteries here in the US rather than importing them, because then you can control the, issues surrounding the mining of lithium and cobalt and all of those things, of which there is plenty in the US apparently. Okay, should we do the US Daily News update again? Is that okay? So I can reconvene. Yes, this is a story about a man accused of breaking into a home and stealing a safe containing jewelry that belongs to the late Western Kentucky University provost Barbara Birch. Has pleaded guilty. His name's Javier Nunez. He pleaded guilty on Tuesday in Warren Circuit Court to charges of first-degree unlawful imprisonment, second-degree robbery, second-degree assault and theft by unlawful taking of $10,000 or more. He agreed to be sentenced to 15 years in prison. He's one of 6 people charged and the first to plead guilty in what authorities said was a plot to steal the jewelry that culminated in a home invasion. Well, condolences to him for getting caught. I think she must have had a lot of jewelry, yeah. She had quite a lot. So there we go. That's the daily news for Bowling Green on this Thursday. It's the 14th of April. I'm Anthony Davis. And just a reminder that Volley has a growing list of shows, including Haley and Allison's Good Morning. Start your morning from 3 a.m. Pacific and 6 o'clock Eastern with 2 hours of silly fun and games. Haley and Allison have trivia, as well as the answers to your burning questions and the news you might have missed. They're followed every day by Live Every Day with Liv Harrison from 5 a.m. Pacific. You can join her every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning to celebrate the little things in life in an extraordinary way. Candid conversations, lots of laughs, and plenty of coffee will fuel and encourage you to live every day. And just on air before me is Get On Up with Jam and Renee. You can wake up on the West Coast with community and conscious living. Jam and Renee have it all covered, from what people think to who's wearing what. And you'll leave entertained and enlightened every day and learn how to pay it all forward. So there we go. We've got a few more newspapers to look at. Then we're going to do a little quiz and try and remember some of the headlines from some of the stories that we've been announcing here on the newspaper register. So if you can, keep your memory banks close to home, that will come in handy. 3 more papers to come. And yes, you get to keep your dignity as the prize. Dominic's just popped in. Hi, Dominic. Welcome. And Chris and Cora, Melted Crab. Stick around. We'll come back and do that in just a moment here on Backchannel. It's Thursday, April 14. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. The Biden administration announced on Wednesday that it's extending the nationwide mask requirements for aeroplanes and public transit for 15 days. It monitors an uptick in COVID-19 cases. The CDC said it was extending the order, which was set to expire on April 8th,
until May 3rd to allow more time to study the BA2 Omicron subvariant that's now responsible for the vast majority of cases in the US. When the Transportation Security Administration, which enforces the rule for planes, bus, trains and transit hubs, extended the requirement last month, it said the CDC had been hoping to roll out a more flexible masking strategy that would have replaced the nationwide requirement. Meanwhile, the man suspected of setting off smoke bombs and spraying gunfire inside a New York City subway car, injuring 23 people, was arrested on Wednesday on a federal charge of violently attacking a mass transportation system, capping an around-the-clock manhunt. Frank Robert James was taken into custody in Lower Manhattan, about 8 miles from the scene of Tuesday's assault, after authorities determined his whereabouts with the help of tips from residents, but from James himself. James was arrested 30 hours after an attack that erupted during the morning commuter rush as the Manhattan-bound N-Line train was pulling into an underground station in Brooklyn's Sunset Park community, renewing fears of violence in the city's subway system. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel.
There it is, the US News Update. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. 5 after 10 here on the West Coast, 5 after 1 Eastern. Thank you for joining Backchannel on this Thursday. It's April 14. I'm Anthony Davis. We've been looking through the newspapers. Astonishing Fox has just joined us. Nice to see you. Garrison is here as well. Welcome, Garrison. First time on the show, so hopefully you'll stick around. And Z is with us too. Welcome, Z. Nice to see you. Okay, a few more papers left, and then we're going to do a little quiz and find out from you if you can remember where some of these headlines came from. Okay, first up, let's jump to a couple of newspapers in California. The Eureka Times Standard is first. They lead this morning with leaders from other countries visit Ukraine. The presidents of 4 countries on Russia's doorstep visited Ukraine on Wednesday and underscored their support for the embattled country, where they saw heavily damaged buildings and demanded accountability for what they called war crimes carried out by Russian forces. Siphoning continues amid higher gas prices. Incidents of gasoline theft from vehicles in Humboldt County did not see any major increases, despite the jarring jump in prices at the pump. It says the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office recorded just one more gasoline theft case in the January to March 2022 period than in October through December, with 15 reports of possible gasoline theft compared to 14 in the final 3 months of last year. I mean, this isn't really a story, is it? I mean, what's the point of putting this story on the front of the newspaper? There's no story. It's brilliant. Well done, Times Standard. You can't put a headline that says siphoning continues amid higher gas prices, and then when you read the story, it turns out it continues at exactly the same rate that it's been going on at previously. Because that's not a story. There's no story. There was one additional case of somebody siphoning gasoline. They say, meanwhile, in the Eureka Police Department, they've seen gas thefts rise in the 2022 period. This year, the department has counted 9 cases compared with only 3 in the previous data. I mean, these numbers are not even worth mentioning. What's your story, Mario? You're basically trying to create a story. The problem is Fox News will see this headline, siphoning continues amid higher gas prices, and they won't read the story. They'll just repeat the headline, and then before you know it, it'll become a thing. And everybody thinks that it's a thing, when it's not even a thing. So what the headline should say is, siphoning does not increase despite higher gas prices. No increase in siphoning amid higher gas prices. I mean, I've just done the work for you, Mario. There you go. Okay, let's move on. with the old papers here. Arcadia candidates talk housing and homelessness. A rezone of illegally subdivided ranch nixed. That's kind of it really on the Times Standard. Let's go to the LA Times next. A very graphic image of a Ukrainian service member walking among destroyed Russian tanks in Bucha, a devastated suburb of northwest of Kiev. And I mean, to say that this is devastation is an understatement. It looks like a nuclear war. I mean, the number of bombs, missiles, and bullets that would have to have been fired to create this level of devastation is unprecedented. You know? I mean, what a waste. What a waste of tanks. Do you know what I mean? Like, what a waste. It's a waste of everything, let alone human life. Why would you want to smash up all of this stuff unnecessarily? It would be very easy to have peace talks. Every time. Peace talks. This is just insane. It says West is further arming Ukraine forces. Biden and other Western leaders pledged additional military aid for Ukraine on Wednesday, while Russia sharply rejected the president's description of its wartime acts as genocide. After an hour-long call with President Volodymyr Zelensky, Biden announced his administration was authorizing an additional $800 million in weapons, ammunition, and other security assistance to Ukraine. Biden, with the 7th week of the war drawing to a close, said the new military aid will contain many of the highly effective weapons systems we've already provided and new capabilities tailored to the wider assault. So, there we go. Do Joshua trees face extinction? It's a big question for Californians here. State biologists on Wednesday recommended against designating the western Joshua tree as threatened with extinction, saying claims in a petition filed by environmentalists about having the effects of climate change on living symbols of the California desert are premature. A final decision by the State Fish and Game Commission on the petition filed by the Center for Biological Diversity is expected in June. If the Joshua tree is not listed as threatened, it will be up to local jurisdictions to set limits on development of commercial, residential, and solar and wind projects across thousands of acres of Southeast California's sunniest real estate. The Joshua tree is a very beautiful tree. You know, it's a very beautiful tree. I don't know if we can put this newspaper on the screen here just to see what it looks like, but it's one of those trees that is it doesn't have a huge amount going on. You know, it's a little spiky, has a few branches, not much going on. There you can see it in the middle of the screen with the moon through the back. Thank you, Carla, for lining it up so beautifully. Very smooth. Nobody would have known there was a human behind that. And there is something magical about driving to Joshua Tree, which I've done a few times, you know, driving through the salt flats and then seeing these trees on the horizon and realizing that you've arrived in a place that is named after its local native vegetation. It's kind of amazing and magical. And there's that moon. In such low resolution, it looks like it's square. It's literally 4 pixels wide, that moon. Just 4 solitary pixels. The square moon of Azkaban. Okay, back to the LA Times. Voters say state is on the wrong track. Californian surveyed cite homelessness, gas prices, and housing among top concerns. Yes, coronavirus cases are dropping and the state's unemployment rate is on the decline. But most California voters still say the Golden State is headed in the wrong direction with high gasoline prices, low housing affordability, and persistent homelessness cited as the biggest challenges. In a new survey in some of the most prominent economic topics, nearly 6 in 10 voters track and more than 70% rated high gasoline prices as a serious concern or somewhat serious problem. Well, you mean like normal gasoline prices? Because, of course, the gasoline prices have been too low for too long. I mean, anything that's a fossil fuel should not be cheap. It just shouldn't. That's the reality. It should not be cheap. Pandemic upends lower death rate for Latinos in LA. It says for years, public health experts have observed how Latinos have overall better mortality rates than white residents despite being more likely to have lower incomes, chronic health issues, and decreased access to healthcare. Now, the historic COVID-19 pandemic has upended the so-called Latino paradox in Los Angeles County. It's very interesting. I mean, I also didn't really understand why Latinos were so inclined to vote for Donald Trump, but they really did in large numbers. I mean, I just can't get my head around it, you know? I just can't. It says now the historic COVID-19 pandemic has upended the Latino paradox. For the first time in the last decade, mortality rate for Latinos in Los Angeles County became worse than that of white residents starting in 2020, the first year of the pandemic, and worsening the next year. Latinos also suffered the highest percentage increase in death rates for all reasons among the 4 racial and ethnic groups analyzed by LA County. Well, maybe that's because they supported Trump and they listened to what Trump had to say about the pandemic, which was not very much. Or drink bleach, or shine a light, or, you know, take ivermectin, or any of this crazy stuff. And finally, Jackie Robinson wanted lasting change, not a day. This is, you have your best day ever on the job. Mine is the day that Jackie Robinson came to town, June 1972. And I was covering the Dodgers for the Times, and Robinson had arrived to have his number retired along with those of Sandy Koufax and Roy Campanella in ceremonies at Dodger Stadium. These were the first numbers that the Dodgers had retired in Brooklyn or Los Angeles, which made it a big deal. So a little story there about Jackie Robinson. Yeah, I'm aware that he was a baseball player. I'm aware that the Dodgers were a baseball team. I can see it. It's a photograph there of a gentleman holding a baseball club and a baseball hat, and he's wearing a baseball sock. That's how I know. Don't ask me what baseball is. I just can tell from the costume. He's wearing a baseball costume. Put it that way. So there he is. And then finally, let's jump on to the Napa Valley Register this morning. Off-grid home nears completion. This is exciting. This would be the first in the city of Napa. The owner of Slav Construction's on the verge of finishing up the city of Napa's first home that is entirely off the power grid. Yes, the Pueblo Park house, when finished in May, will use SunPower solar panels for all its electrical needs and lithium-ion batteries, 5 Tesla Powerwalls to store that energy, with no connection to the Pacific Gas and Electric Company grid. So basically, rather than having a traditional connection to a utility company, your home acts as its own utility company. Instead of grid T? What is that? Instead of a grid tie. Okay. Instead of a grid tie, you're using the sun. You collect it during the day, you throw the energy into the batteries, and then throughout the evening, the batteries supply all your power needs. I don't understand why this is such a big deal. Like, it's like the first home to do this. We should all be off the grid. You know, it's perfectly possible for everybody to be off the grid. And these Tesla Powerwall batteries, they basically are old car batteries that have, passed their life in the car, and they just attach them to the side of your house. Slav said he was partially motivated to go off-grid because of the estimated amount of time it was going to take for Pacific Gas and Electric to connect the house. They said it would take 9 to 12 months to energize the property. I mean, I don't understand, because I actually thought it was illegal to come off-grid. I thought that there was some law here in the US, whether it be federal or state law in California, that said that you can't actually be completely free of the grid. You have to be connected to the grid. They say customers submit an application for hooking up power, and then service connection times vary depending on the complexity of the project and the number of projects PG&E has in progress. Well, PG&E are famously the electric company that have caused so many wildfires now that they spend more of their money paying fines and paying money back to communities that have been devastated by fires because their infrastructure is so terrible. So of course you want to go off-grid. You're desperate to be off-grid rather than be connected to PG&E's electricity supply. The niche farmers of Napa Valley, keeping our AG landscape interesting. This is not all farmers look the same. It says here in wine country, it's easy to forget there are plenty of small-scale farms in the Napa area that aren't focused on grapes or vino. These include the folks behind Marshall's Honey, the ones who provide the people of Napa with the vegetables and seedlings of their dreams. Like Big Ranch Farms, or those who keep the area's beloved Oreo cows fed and happy like Stewart Ranch. But regardless of their crop of choice or entry to farm life, the agriculturalists of Napa County say they are essential to the fabric of our community for culinary scene. Well, that's nice to know, because, you know, you can combine that story with the fact that we're going to run out of food soon. Yes, now a lot of people are starting to use shipping containers as homes now. I've heard about this. This is very exciting. There's actually a house near here that's built out of a shipping container, which I like. Or it might just be a shipping container. Presidents offer support. The presidents of 4 countries on Russia's doorstep visited Ukraine on Wednesday and underscored their support for the embattled country, where they saw heavily damaged buildings and demanded accountability for what they called war crimes carried out by Russian forces. Same story, different newspaper. That's the Napa Valley Register this morning. So, I thought we would do a little quiz now, just to see if you were listening to the newspaper review. This is actually Carla's idea. I think it's a work of genius. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name a headline, and if you can tell me which newspaper that headline came from, because we've reviewed a whole bunch, and I can just remind you in case you missed. We started with the Abilene Reporter News. We then did the Beaumont Enterprise, the Houston Chronicle, the Longview News Journal, the San Antonio Express News, the Bradenton Herald, DeSantis fighting the culture wars was from the News Press, the Bowling Green Daily News, the Times Standard for Eureka and Humboldt County, the LA Times, and then finally we did the Napa Valley Register. Oh, it wasn't going to be. It wasn't going to be naming the newspaper. It was going to be naming the facts. Okay, well let's look at. Let's do both. Why not? You know, I'll help you with the answers because I'm that kind of guy. But the first question was, how old is Dairy Queen? Now this Dairy Queen story is. Where did that come from? Let's have a little. I'm going back in time here. That was actually my favourite story so far. That was all about the... here it is. It was actually the first newspaper we did. This came from the Abilene Reporter News. And so we were talking about celebrating the birthday of the Dairy Queen. We were talking about the cost of an ice cream and how they're reducing the cost of the ice cream to the same price as the year that the Dairy Queen is celebrating. So if you can name the year, then I would very much like to know. Joey's just dropped in. Ryder's given us an answer. Ryder, I'll announce your answer in just a minute. Let's see if anybody else is going to come up with an answer. Don't look it up. You're not going on the Googles. Just based on your memories of this show. No Googling, please. How old is the Dairy Queen? That's the question in today's show. You can wake up your Echo Show, say the word say, and then your message. Or if you are using your thumbs at backchannel.tv, you can do that there too. Okay, so that's a really good way to do that. I has joined us. Joey's joined us. Spiffy Bear. Green Leopard has popped in. Suzanne, Ryder, Frequent Guinea Pig. How old is the Dairy Queen today? That's the question anyway. So we've had one guess so far from Ryder, who is guessing incorrectly. Ryder, you've guessed 79 years of age, and that is not the correct age. It's a very good guess, though. But so feel free to have another go. So they've decided to reduce the cost of the ice cream just for a few days to the same price as the age of the Dairy Queen farm. Yeah, interesting. All right, should we do another question while you're still answering that one? Ryder's given us another answer. Ryder, I think if it's not 79, it's 89. No, you're close, but you're actually going in the wrong direction. I'll put it that way. You're going in the wrong direction. So, bring it back a bit. Next question. Which US city has approved paid parental leave regardless of gender? This was a question that, this was a story that came up when we were working around the newspapers earlier. So if you think you know, then you can put your answer in the chat in the usual way. Which US city has approved paid parental leave regardless of gender? I'll give you a clue. That was out of a newspaper from Texas. But what was the city? What was the city where that story came from? It's quite surprising, actually, considering. And one more question. 2,000 jobs will be going to which state, and what will they be making? This was one of the more recent newspapers that we did, so hopefully you'll be able to remember this one from just a few moments ago. Kind of a big story, and a good one too. So it was the main headline on this particular newspaper. In fact, they've devoted pretty much the entire front page to it, because clearly this is the biggest thing that's happened to this place for decades, tragically. So I'll give you all the answers in just a minute, but I'll give you a bit of time just to think of those. And if you're listening to me right now on a device without a screen, make sure to grab your phone and go to backchannel.tv. You can join the chat there. If you're listening on a smart speaker or on the app and not watching on a screen, just visit backchannel.tv and join the chat. You can see me. If you can see me right now on your Echo Show or your Fire TV, the magic word is say, or Echo say hello, or Echo say yes, or Echo say whatever. The magic word is say to make that connection with me, and then I'll see your answer here as well. So, yes, it's very interesting. I'll give you all of the answers in just a couple of minutes. Okay, well, let's go through those questions again. The first question was, how old is the Dairy Queen? That story came from the newspapers earlier. We were looking at the Abilene Reporter News. How old is the Dairy Queen? This is celebrating the age of the Dairy Queen. Queen Elizabeth is 95. The Dairy Queen is not quite as old as Queen Elizabeth, but through April 24th, you can get a small ice cream cone for the same price as the birthday year celebration. So that was on the front of the Abilene Reporter News this morning. And then we asked which US city has approved paid parental leave, regardless of gender, which might surprise some of you to know the answer to that. I'm keen for you to know the answer. I gave you a clue, and that was in the state of Texas. And then finally, 2,000 jobs will be going to which state, and what is it that they'll be making? If you know, then let me know on the chat, either at backchannel.tv or by talking to your Echo Show device, and see how you get on. And I'll give you another minute before I give you the answers, because that's the kind of guy I am. Yeah, there seems to be a whole lot of celebration for this electric battery story. Or did I just give the answer away? Oops. There we are. So, I'm not very good at quizzes. I was briefly a quiz show host on the television, and so I should be quite good at this. But I worked out the other day that it was 21 years ago that I was a quiz show host. 21 years ago. Isn't that crazy? That I've lived that long, and I still look like this. Who'd have thought? Okay, I'm going to give you the answers because I think, it's only fair and proper that we should run through those. So I asked you if you could remember the headlines and indeed the newspapers that they came from. So let's do that in reverse order. We asked the 2,000 jobs will be going to which state and what will they be making? Can you remember? 2,000 jobs going to anyone? It was Bowling Green. It was Bowling Green, and this is electric vehicle battery plant to bring 2,000 jobs to Trans Park, Warren County. This is Envision, which is one of the world's largest producers of batteries for electric vehicles, announced on Wednesday at the state capitol. It plans to build a $2 billion, 3 million square foot plant on a 512-acre site that was recently added to the Kentucky Trans Park Industrial Park. So there we go. That's the answer to that one. Then the other one was which U.S. city has approved parental leave, regardless of gender. Now, I gave you a clue, didn't I, that it was Texas. But whereabouts in Texas is the question. Can you remember? Well, that came out of Houston, and we read that on the Houston Chronicle. And it said city employees will have access to paid parental leave for the first time beginning in May after a decade-long push to adopt the family-friendly policy that advocates hope will help the city attract and retain working parents. So there we go. And then the first question was, how old is Dairy Queen? We had so many guesses, and we've been inundated with guesses, but the answer is, in fact, of course, 75. Yes. As a Lowell subject celebrates Dairy Queen's 75th birthday, they are celebrating the ice cream cone for just 75 cents. I love the fact that they're not really saying how long they're running it for. They're saying, so for a few days this month, you can get basically 3 cones for the price of 1. Who does that? Who says for a few days this month and not be specific about it? That means that if there's going to be a rush on them, they have a right to kind of say, actually, no, we didn't mean it. We're done now. So there we go. Those are the questions. Those were the answers, and hopefully you enjoyed that little section. Ryder says, I didn't even know that I forgot. I thought it was somewhere between the 80s, 79 or 71 or something. Well, it was 75. But that's okay. You're entitled to kind of have a random guess, random stab at it. Completely normal. Who doesn't like a quiz? Right, let's go back to some of the stories that we were going to talk about. I mentioned at the beginning of the show this story about this execution of another black boy by a white police officer. This is the video that's been released of a white officer fatally shooting a black man in the back of the head after a scuffle over a stun gun. Footage of the incident that happened on the 4th of April in Grand Rapids, Michigan, shows Patrick Lyoya, who's 26, running from the officer following a traffic stop. The officer's not been named. Is then heard telling Mr. Lyoya to let go of his taser before the man is shot as he lies face down on the ground. The shooting has led to protests. Dozens of demonstrators gathered on Wednesday outside the Grand Rapids Police Department demanding the name of the police officer involved to be made public. Mr. Lyoya is originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He'd lived in Grand Rapids for about 5 years, according to the Office of Civil Rights Attorney Ben Crump, who's representing the Lyoya family. So yet another black boy is executed by a white police officer. This was actually done in a residential street outside a house. I watched the video, and the police officer made a dozen mistakes, in my mind, in terms of not understanding how to de-escalate a situation. He pulled over the car pulled over. Well, that's the first sign that the car is, that the driver is being is responsible. So you don't have to kind of go crazy. If the car doesn't pull over, then you've got a chase on your hands, right? That's one thing. And the fact that this kid gets out of the car, first thing he does is get out of the car, which I think is a pretty clever thing to do, right? Because you're basically going, look, I've got nothing to hide. And the kid's saying, what did I do? Why did you stop me? And unfortunately, that's where the officer makes his first mistake. Because instead of saying, look, it's no big deal, you've got your vehicle registration doesn't match the car, can we just have a chat about it? He shouts, get back in the car, get back in the car. And of course, the boy at that point just doesn't really know what the hell's going on. He's starting to worry that he's going to get shot because he knows, as we know now, that police officers like to shoot people on traffic stops. So, and because, the way that the police officer didn't respond to the behavior of this guy, which was not out of the ordinary, he just had his own agenda, because he was trying to exert his own authority, because he thinks his authority is more important than the kid. I mean, it just doesn't make sense, It doesn't make sense. Anyway, yesterday, the Grand Rapids Police Department released footage of the incident from a police body camera and a police unit dash cam, a mobile phone, and a home surveillance system. One of the videos shows the officer pulling over Mr. Layoya's vehicle shortly after 8 o'clock local time. The officer decided to stop the car for improper registration. Mr. Layoya gets out of the car, but the officer asks him to get back in. Appearing confused, Mr. Layoya stays out of the vehicle and asks what has he done. The officer asks if he speaks English, and Mr. Layoya replies yes. Mr. Layoya is then asked repeatedly if he has a license, and after a brief conversation, he runs from the officer. The two are then seen wrestling on the ground, and the policeman gets out his taser, which the two fight over. The officer tells Mr. Layoya to let go of the stun gun. During the altercation, the officer accidentally turns off his body camera. Oh, accidentally. Okay. However, footage filmed from the mobile phone of Mr. Layoya's passenger has also been released, which appears to show the officer then shooting Mr. Layoya in the back of the head. Speaking at a Wednesday briefing, the Chief of Police, Eric Winstrom, said, "From my view of the video, taser was deployed twice. Taser did not make contact. Mr. Layoya was shot in the head. However, that's the only information I have, describing the incident as a tragedy. The police officer is currently on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation. He would not be identified unless criminal charges were brought." Well, Ben Crump, representing the Layoya family, has demanded the officer be fired and charged. He tweeted the video showed the police officer shooting unarmed Mr. Layoya while he was on the ground and facing away from the officer. Patrick never used violence against this officer, even though the officer used violence against him in several instances, Mr. Crump said. I mean, look, this is yet another one of these stories, which it's not even a story, is it? It's just a reality for the family of this kid who's 26, did nothing wrong. A traffic stop does not warrant being executed. It's about the crime and the punishment being suitable for the crime, right? So if you've got some dodgy license situation going on, what's that? A fine? That's a fine, right? And being told to put it right. Does not warrant you paying with your life. But unfortunately, the police have such a kind of air of authority. They think that they have this, they feel like they have this God-given right to choose who lives and who dies. And that's the tragedy of this. I mean, really, the police shouldn't be allowed to have guns because obviously they don't know how to use them. I mean, why would you shoot somebody with a gun in the back of the head if you weren't a racist mad person? Because it's a lynching, effectively, isn't it? It's a lynching. Pulls over a black guy. The black guy is, says, "What have I done?" The guy refuses to say what he's done and just shouts, "Get back in the car," which is just weird, isn't it? Because normally the police officer would want the guy to get out of the car eventually and put his hands on the hood. But so it's almost like telling him to get back in the car is like really weird. There's just no consistent training. I mean, have you noticed this? When you kind of look at... Yeah, he goes, "Do you speak English?" And he kind of makes this talky sound, It's just steeped in racism. The guys from the Democratic Republic of Congo, right, where they speak English, but they speak English with an African accent, right? And so it's more about the fact that the police officer didn't have the ability to understand the English that this chap was talking. The guy spoke and understood English very nicely, you know? In fact, he probably spoke multiple languages, and I'm sure the police officer barely spoke one language. Anyway, this really is the point, isn't it? That yet again, after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all of these executions of innocent black people, young black people in many cases, how it is that we are still, all these years later, you know, having to go through this roll call of names of people that have been killed at the hands of the police. Beth has joined us. Shannon is in. Spiteful Ferret is here. Jessica's here. Hi, Jessica. And Ryder's back in as well. Seth and No and Joey. Great to see you here on Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. It's the Anthony Davis Show. We've got just 5 minutes left before we talk to your pal, Hal, because it's Thursday. Yeah. The reason they pulled this guy over was because of his license registration not matching the car, you know? And unfortunately, for some reason, there's this culture in America to think that it is normal for somebody to pay the ultimate price for committing the smallest crime. I mean, in the case of George Floyd, he was unknowingly using a fake $20 bill. Well, how do you cope as a family member, you know? I mean, Breonna Taylor's mother particularly was somebody that I felt this connection with as a parent myself. You know, you really get a sense that it's just too much to bear, you know, to lose a child to the very police service that is supposed to protect you. Simple Papa's just dropped in from Oregon. Hello. Nice to see you. Welcome to Backchannel. So let me have a little continue as we look through what more we have here on this particular subject. I mean, I watched the video of this yesterday. I think, what was the one I watched? I didn't watch them all. There's 4 videos released. One was from the mobile phone of the passenger. I wonder who the passenger was that he kind of didn't intervene but just filmed. I wonder if it was a friend or a neighbor, or I don't know who the passenger was. Yeah, probably terrified. But can you imagine what it must be like to be like permanently in fear of the police and know that if you get pulled over, this could be the last time you do anything? I mean, this is your life effectively over. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer said that she'd spoken to Lyoya's family and that he had 2 young daughters and 5 siblings. He arrived in the United States as a refugee with his family fleeing violence, Whitmer said. He had his whole life ahead of him. Isn't that crazy that you come to the free world from the Democratic Congo, and you seek to be, you know, free of persecution, and you end up getting executed by the police for a traffic stop, for a vehicle issue, you know? Whether the officer faces charges for the shooting, though the Kent County prosecutor warned, whether the officer faces charges for the shooting, though the Kent County prosecutor warned, the investigation could take longer than expected. Becker asked for the public's patience while his office completed its investigation. In a statement last week, adding its office is working to achieve its goal of just a result for all involved. Of a just result. Yeah. Yeah, his family were fleeing violence in the Congo, and that's why he came here. And look what he gets. Well, this is the problem, is that we're now starting to realize that with all of these videos that are coming out, how many black people were executed by the police before video was available, that where the police officer got off. Because, prior to George Floyd or Derek Chauvin being convicted for the murder of George Floyd, police officers never got convicted for these things. They always got off. Always. They effectively had a license to murder. Now, this comes in the wake of other police-involved shootings in Grand Rapids, So clearly something's going on. The Kent County prosecutor, Chris Becker, hasn't brought any charges against the unidentified officer yet. He said this is an extremely critical incident, one that everyone involved in the investigation is taking very seriously. The Michigan State Police are doing everything they can to complete the investigation in a timely manner. But what investigation is there? You've got 4 angles of 4 videos. Body cam video, dash cam video, surveillance video, and mobile phone video. And you can see what happened. It's so obvious to see what happened that the police officer escalated this. There's a statement that was released yesterday that came from Gretchen Whitmer, the governor, saying the lieutenant governor and I spoke with Patrick's family and our hearts are with them and the Grand Rapids community who are dealing with unimaginable pain and loss. Patrick was 26. He arrived in the United States as a refugee with his family fleeing violence. He had his whole life ahead of him. Patrick was a son, a dad of 2 daughters, and an older brother to his 5 siblings. Michigan State Police will conduct a transparent, independent investigation of the shooting. Then prosecutors must consider all the evidence, follow the law, and take appropriate action on charges. Justice is foundational to safety, and without justice, we are all less safe. Patrick's father asked me to convey his hope that any demonstrations in his son's honor remain peaceful. And as governor, I share his view. We must come together and build a future where black Michiganders are afforded equal rights, dignity, and safety in our communities. I will never stop fighting to make Michigan a more equitable and just state. So there we go, the words of Gretchen Whitmer, the governor, there. The lieutenant governor, Garland Gilchrist II, also chimed in, saying that the family are feeling deep pain that many have felt. So there we go. That's a story that we'll kind of keep an eye on as we can. I think it's time to jump in with Hal, because he's your pal and he's on next, and we're going to have a little chat with him, find out what's happening in his show. He'll be with us in just a couple of moments. Finally on the show, I did want to mention, and I'll just do it very quickly, that we were going to be celebrating a great American today. Do you remember? And it was the architect Louis Sullivan, who on this day in 1924, the American architect and father of skyscrapers, died at the age of 67. He was a critic, an architect and mentor. Louis Sullivan had an impact on an architecture that extended well beyond his work in Chicago, from the globally recognized phrase, "Form ever follows function," to the mentorship of a young Frank Lloyd Wright. Sullivan's influence set in motion some of the most important ideas in modern architecture. And I was just looking earlier at some of the projects that he had designed, some of the constructions that he had done. The Wainwright Building is one of his in St. Louis, Missouri, which is kind of beautiful. And the Carson, Peary, Scott and Company Building, also in Chicago. The Bayard Condick Building in Manhattan, which is, again, stunning. I mean, the style is remarkable, really. The Krause Music Store in Chicago, the Union Trust Building in St. Louis, the Prudential Building is in Buffalo, New York, Van Allen Building in Clinton, Iowa. One of the most amazing is the Garrick Theater, which is in Chicago, built in 1892. I mean, architects are the most amazing people, aren't they? Let's say hi to your pal and my pal, Hal Pal, your Hal Pal. as he's going to be on in just a couple of minutes. Let's beckon him in. This way. Maybe this way. He's coming in this way. Oh, this way. Down from the corner. Hello, little Hal. I feel like you're Mike TV.
Oh, from Willy Wonka.
Yeah, Mike TV. There you go.
Yes. Augustus Gloop.
Yes.
I want my chocolate.
It's such a good film that, it was such a shame that they kind of made another one, because I do appreciate an original every time.
And the other one is
the Johnny Depp version versus the Gene
borderline
version.
Unwatchable.
Unwatchable, yeah.
Yeah.
But have you ever watched any interviews with Gene Wilder, like before he died? Just like images of him. Is he dead? Actually, maybe he's not dead.
Yes, he passed.
Oh, he did die. There's some very interesting interviews because he was actually quite bitter. He gave up Hollywood because he hated the swearing and the sex and all of the kind of stuff that kind of creeped into Hollywood. He hated that. He's kind of a very wholesome guy. And he felt that comedy could be done without the need for profanity and, just good writing. And so he basically quit Hollywood. And there's a few interviews of him after that time that I've watched. And he really is quite like angry about the state of entertainment. He really felt that his period was like very much the golden age of cinema. And I don't disagree with him, really.
He makes some good points, but time marches on. To swear or not to swear, well, we're not going to swear right here, family show. But I often have students, because when I'm teaching performance and writing, ask me, are we okay to swear? And my answer is thusly, do people swear in real life? Yes. Are we trying to do a depiction of some sort of commentary or heightening or snapshot of real life? Yes. So can I swear in my work? Yes. Now, is it earned? Is it worth it? Or are you using it as a crutch? Are you saying, F this, S that, because you can't think of anything clever to say? So there's the rub.
Yeah, I get you. And I agree. But I just feel like maybe his commentary was about the fact that films have kind of lost their way. And, if you watch Marvel movies
yes and
now,
no.
It's like there's a lot of action, but there's not a lot of... it's almost as if the visuals are more important than the story.
Many. Yeah,
and
many.
It's the storytelling that I think he was very much connected with.
It's the rare film in the superhero genre that breaks through and is transcendent in that way. But I also think about Eddie Murphy was saying that Bill Cosby called him up and was saying, you got to watch your mouth. You're cursing too much. You can't do this kind of cursing. And, those comments are especially, questionable in light of Bill Cosby's actions.
The irony.
At the time, yes. Yeah. But at the time, Eddie Murphy said to Bill Cosby, well, it's working for me. So he said something to the effect of, have a Jell-O pudding pop and shut the bleep up.
It's very good advice. I wanted to tell you that I watched Coda the other day. The Oscar-winning movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Did you see it yet?
There are two of the Oscar nominees that I have not seen. One is Coda, the other is Belfast.
Okay.
I need to get my act together here and watch the Oscar winner.
Yeah, well, Belfast I think is a little heavier. This one is quite light and fun, but it's really lovely. It's just lovely to see a film that is just like wholesome and joyous and positive. Positive energy. Just makes a change. But,
it is refreshing
because there's so much terrifying. I do struggle to find stuff to watch. I don't have much time to watch television, but I do find myself scrolling. And I'm just like, nah, I can't find anything.
Oh, there's good stuff. I find that I have too much stuff to watch.
Really?
I do a podcast about what's streaming. I'll recommend a show to you on Apple TV Plus. One of my favorite recent shows. Two shows on Apple TV Plus actually. Severance.
Yeah.
is about this company places a chip in people's heads that separates your personality from when you're in your off hours and when you're working. And it turns out there's some devious devious characters at play trying to manipulate people's minds.
Oh, wow.
And then
I've seen
another
that advertised, actually. I should watch that.
really worth it, worth checking out. If you're a fan of Charlie Kaufman, or and then the British series on Netflix, Black Mirror.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, it did
really
look a
has
little bit
those
like
kind
that,
of-
yeah. And what was the other one?
Pachinko, and it's about it traces the roots of this Korean family back from the 1920s to the 1980s, and it goes back and forth between two timelines, and it's about cultural identity, it's about your roots, but it's really compelling. It's so beautifully done. Man, I am
And
just...
what network is that on?
That's also on Apple TV+.
Also, okay, great. Well, that's given me some stuff to focus on because I have been struggling a bit. But I do think Apple does seem to be winning the day at the moment. You know, they've definitely got the
They've
right.
kicked it into gear. Certainly, they've got they've been coming out with several critical darlings and winners lately.
Right.
So
yeah. No, they've definitely, and they've got the budget for it. So I guess that's partly why.
Also, on April 18th, The Batman will be on
Yes.
HBO Max.
Oh,
HBO Max.
great. All right, I look forward to that. Saves me seeing it in the cinema. Hal, thank you. We'll see you in just a few minutes. That's your pal
Always
Hal.
a pleasure.
He's next here on Backchannel. I'm not here tomorrow because I'm going to Disneyland, but I'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.